Okay, how about ES6? Okay, quite a few hands. TypeScript. Oh, even more than ES6, that's great. Okay, now about Angular. Who has written an app in Angular 1? Quite a few. How about who has tried Angular 2? Also quite a few. And how about who has written or maybe is writing a production app in Angular 2? Oh, nice. I salute the brave ones. Okay, great. Now, before we start, a little background. I work at Scope Technologies, and a couple of words about the company. First, we're a telematics company. That means we work at the intersection of telecommunications, vehicles, and computer science. We're a multinational company. We were founded in 1999 in South Africa, and we have offices in quite a few countries. And I work at the research and development offices here in Riga, and that's where most of the software development happens. So we get to work with some really modern technologies, as the company is not afraid to experiment, and hence Angular 2. And, but for me, one of the company's greatest assets is smart people. Well, maybe not me, but I get to learn something new from my colleagues almost every day. Recently, the company made a video about some of the things we do, and I would like to play it for you.
Rely on Scope Technologies to provide the unique technology and essential guidance necessary to navigate this new digital path. Proven effective in its nearly 2 decades of global activity, Scope builds on more than 1,000 person-hours of research to deliver unrivaled expertise in all aspects of insurance telematics and usage-based insurance. An award-winning global innovator holding numerous patents, Scope's revolutionary end-to-end telematics solutions embrace every aspect of hardware, software, back-end systems, big data analytics, and even cutting-edge virtual reality. Today, leading companies in more than 50 countries rely on Scope for next-generation enterprise solutions. They help them build deeper, ongoing consumer relationships, develop more accurate risk assessments, and significantly improve claims management. Connected car technology is driving the next insurance revolution. Scope Technologies is at the forefront of this disruption, advising insurance carriers and expanding their capabilities with leading telematics and expertise. Scope Technologies, your trusted partner in embracing digital transformation.
There are quite a few of us here, and if you would like to know more, please feel free to come up and speak to me. So back to Angular. A little bit about how we use Angular at Scope. We've used Angular in quite a few projects now, and we found Angular 1 to be quite productive. And so here are a couple of screenshots from a project I was involved in, which is a very highly interactive app for creating custom dashboards and exploring data. And last year, when the Angular 2 betas came out, we started to look at using it for our next project. And here's a couple of screenshots of a work in progress app we're building now on Angular 2. So on the agenda today, we'll have a quick look at the features and core concepts of Angular. Then we'll have a look at a few features that I find interesting, and then we'll talk about the state of Angular. Angular is built on very modern, emerging technologies, and since this is a quick tour, I can't cover everything, so I'll have to go fast and oversimplify things at times. So these are just a couple of things we will not cover. We'll focus on Angular instead. So Angular is a platform, whatever that means, for building applications with web technologies. So the Angular team says it's a platform, and I guess it means that it comes with a lot of things out of the box. And one important thing is that it's built for both desktop and mobile in mind. So here are some high-level features of Angular 2. So firstly, what's interesting about Angular 2 is probably performance. Now, Angular 1 wasn't bad on desktop, but it could run into some problems sometimes, especially in mobile. So Angular 2 has been built so it runs fast in mobile browsers. It does this by generating code from templates, so that's optimized for modern JavaScript engines. It makes use of code splitting, so the initial payload is smaller. And with Universal, it's a very interesting feature that allows to pre-render the first view of your app, so the user gets to see the app instantly. Secondly, it's productivity. Angular 2 has some powerful templating syntax. It works great with IDEs like Visual Studio Code, WebStorm, and it has a CLI for quickly getting started building your apps and automating some tedious steps. Now, Angular is cross-platform, so of course it means you can build web apps that run in a browser, but you can also build apps that run on desktop as native apps, that run on mobile as native apps, and you can build these new cool things, progressive web apps. And lastly, Angular tries to address the full development story, including testing, animation, and accessibility. You can write Angular apps in a few different languages. So, firstly, if you want to, you can write them in ES5, or what we understand with JavaScript today. So it's JavaScript that runs across all your browsers. But you can also take advantage of new syntax features in ES6 and ES7, which makes writing apps a lot more pleasant. And of course, if you want to go even a step further, you can use TypeScript to make your experience really nice. So it also has official support for Dart, and theoretically you could write in any language that compiles to JavaScript, but there are not many samples out there, so I guess you'll be on your own. But Angular itself is built in TypeScript, so that's the kind of the default language, and you'll find most of the samples out there in TypeScript, and that's the language I'll be showing you today. So yeah, you can theoretically do anything you can do in these more modern languages in ES5, but the newer languages make working with it that much nicer. So, but making a switch from ES5 to ES6 shouldn't be a problem, since every ES5 program is a valid ES6 program, and also every ES6 program is a valid TypeScript program. So your investment carries forward, and you can transition gradually. So first, we'll have a look at some core concepts, and so we'll look at components, services, and modules. We'll also have a quick look at directives and pipes, and the samples I'll show here are from an adapted version of the Angular 2 Tour of Heroes sample app and you can find the code later on the GitHub site. So, okay, let's get started. First up, it's components. So, components are the basic building blocks of Angular 2 apps, and they make up the UI of the application, and they consist of two parts, kind of code and markup, or in MVC terms, that could be a controller and a view. So let's start at the bottom, like the templates. So it's a basic HTML template that's been enhanced with some additional syntax. But the main thing is that it's HTML, and we'll get to the bindings later. So the code part is basically a class that's been annotated with a decorator. And if we look at the class, it's basically just a simple class with fields, a constructor, methods. And going back to the template, we can see that we can easily figure out what these bindings mean. So the double curly braces are bindings from the component to the DOM. Same for these square brackets. These are just syntax for attributes. The round brackets are bindings from the DOM back to the component. And when you combine the two, it's both ways. So it keeps this hero name in sync with the template and the component. And now let's inspect the metadata part a bit closer. So Angular uses this decorator syntax for specifying metadata. And to those of you who this may be new, this is a new feature that's coming in ES7, but TypeScript has an implementation that we can use today. And what this basically is a function that operates on the class. So the component, we pass this object literal to this component function, and it can modify the class and set it up for Angular to know what it does. So this metadata specifies the template that's used for this component. And hello? Technical difficulties? It's okay? Okay. And the second thing, sometimes problems just solve themselves. And the second thing is it has like the selector, so Angular knows where to place this particular component in other components. And so Angular apps are basically just trees of components. You start with a root component somewhere in your HTML, and it can contain other components and so on. So that's basically it for components. Well, you could put all the code in components. It's nice to have a nice separation of concerns so that you know where to find things. And also, what happens if you want to share some functionality between components? So that's where services come in. They allow you to put some common code in some place and then use it within a component. And a service can be any value function or a feature, but usually they are a class, and it's decorated with this injectable attribute. So this class just handles making calls to the API. And now's a good time to talk about dependency injection. So this is deeply integrated into Angular 2, and the way how dependencies are resolved in Angular are through dependency injection. So here we see that this hero component gets the hero service injected in the constructor. And also, if we go back to the service example, we see that the hero service itself uses the HTTP service from Angular. And one last important thing that we need to talk about is Angular modules. And these organize related blocks of functionality. And an Angular module is basically a class with the ng module declarator. And what they're used for is for, let me say that this concept is pretty similar to how it is in Angular 1. And all apps have at least one Angular module, but you can split your app into multiple modules for organization, and you can use modules for implementing lazy loading and loading sections. Let's say you have a section, a module for each section, so you can lazily load the module only on demand so that the initial payload is smaller. And of course it's good for reuse, and libraries will make use of modules to package up some functionality. And so here we see a simple app module that imports a bunch of stuff from Angular, declares some components of its own, and bootstraps the root component. So these three things are what you'll be writing mostly when you're writing Angular apps: components, services, and modules. But it's two more important concepts that we'll run over quickly. And the first one is directives. And the way I think about directives is components without templates. So they add some additional behavior or modify the structure of the DOM. And let's kind of look at two quick examples. For example, this is a directive that hooks up an input to the attribute, to the validation system of Angular. So it's an attribute, and the implementation is a class without a template. And structural directives are things that modify the DOM. And here we see examples of two often used directives that are ngIf and ngFor. So ngIf just renders or not renders a section of code, and ngFor repeats it. But structural, there's rarely need to implement your own structural directives. It's usually enough what comes out of the box. And the last thing I want to mention is pipes. And these are basically things that can transform displayed values within a template. And for example, here we see the uppercase pipe that takes what's in the takes a value and basically turns it in uppercase. So that's it for core concepts. We have central thing that we have a component and its template that's been glued together with metadata. Values flow through from the components and templates with bindings. We can use directives, services, and the app is structured into modules. So we're making pretty good time. So how about a demo of a simple app? How a simple app basically looks. So let me switch over to my code editor. Here I'm using Visual Studio Code because it's awesome. And on the right side, on the left side, we see a very simple app that's been stripped down to the bare minimum. So we have some configuration, the package JSON for loading dependencies, system.js for mapping where to find dependencies, but the code starts at the index HTML. Since Angular is built on very modern standards that have not been implemented in all browsers, then we have these polyfills to fill the gaps. And so that allows us to write very modern code in, well, across all browsers, including IE. And so that's just here for filling gaps while browsers implement the standards. And the Angular app is basically loaded here. So what this does is it loads the main module, which bootstraps our app module, which starts our root component, which is heroes component. It has this template of heroes component HTML, and it uses another child component, which is details. And so here we have a very simple app, and I've got it running here. So it renders a list. You can click on an item and add a new item. So you'll notice, well, two things. Firstly, that the app is very nicely organized. You can easily figure out where things should be, and it's easy to start at the root and discover how the app is written. So it's very nicely structured. And the other thing that I personally like very much is that you'll notice, apart from these polyfill scripts, we don't have to list all the scripts that our app has. Like, we don't have to load scripts manually. It's all figured out from the imports in the module. So it follows all the dependencies and does this automatically. So that's what I like very much. So that's it for a simple app. And let's have a look at some features that I find very interesting. And let's start with a simple one. It's component styles. Well, component styles is not a new idea. The idea has been talked about in the context of web components. Other frameworks may have some solutions here, and but it's good that Angular has very nice support for this kind of thing. So Angular 2 apps are styled with regular CSS like any other app. You can use your Bootstrap for laying out things in a grid, get some global styles like colors. But in addition to this, Angular 2 has the ability to bundle component styles into our component. And here we have a component from the app we saw previously. And in this metadata, it specifies this CSS file, which will apply only to this component. And let's see how it works. Let's say we want to color this thing, let's say a different color. What you would do normally, well, let me see. There's a CSS file here, and this is an H2. So we would, let's say, H2, color, magenta. Oops. We only wanted this, but now everything's screwed up. So let's not do that. Instead, let's use component styles. So, well, let me say one more thing. How would we fix this? Well, we would go into the HTML, add some class to it so that it applies only to that element so we could select it more precisely. But with component styles, so I want this guy. And let's add the same H2 element with, let's say, just color. I didn't save the previous. Okay. And there we go. So how does this work? Well, if we inspect the element, Angular 2 generated this unique selector here and handles the transformation of the CSS file of the component style so that it is guaranteed to only apply to this element. When I first saw this feature, I thought, why would I use this? This will only result in an extra request, and it will be hard to maintain. But actually, after some time working with a larger project, I really wish that I could use this feature a lot more, because our global style sheet is a mess, and this would make it a lot cleaner. Okay, so that's component styles. Next up, I want to talk about animations. So again, you can animate apps with CSS animations like you can do with any app. But in addition to this, Angular has a nice API that's built on top of web animations that allow to specify animations in this declarative way. So we have states, how things should look when they are in a certain state, and transitions between states, which define how the animations, what animations are possible. So, as I said, this is built on top of the Web Animations API, and so the benefits of it being JavaScript based is that you can use automatic property calculations for heights, which are tricky to do in CSS, and you get callbacks for animations, so you can orchestrate very complex animations. So I've got this very basic demo here. Let me just clear out everything. So what we've got here is we added web animations polyfill that's needed because web animations currently run only in Chrome, but with this guy they run across all browsers, and we added the animations to this component. So we've got this is a list component, and now we added two states with an inactive and active state, and transitions between them, so that if I switch to the app, I should be able to see that this animates nicely. So that's it for animations. Let me just clean out the changes. Okay, so animations are a very easy way to set up animations in your components. And the next feature is a very interesting one, which is ahead of time compilation. And so when we look at templates, it has some extra syntax there, and naturally browsers cannot display it natively. So it must be transformed somehow. And typically, for a lot of frameworks, this happens at runtimes. And In Angular, the transformation is done by the Angular compiler. It takes the template and compiles it to JavaScript code so it executes fast. And firstly, when we do this at runtime, firstly, there's got to be a compiler there, and it takes some time. So if we could pre-compile the templates in advance, we would increase startup performance because the templates don't need to be compiled, and we would reduce the transfer size because and you don't need to ship the Angular compiler with the app. And the Angular compiler is about a third of the library size. So the compiler has a command line interface, which is MGC, and it compiles the templates on the server at build time. And on top of this, once the templates are compiled into JavaScript, we can add an additional step of tree shaking, which basically works on JavaScript files and gets rid of all the unused code, so that whatever is not used is not packaged with the app. And this doesn't just apply to your code, but also to library code. And if you're not using a part of Angular, it never gets bundled up and shipped with the app, thereby reducing the payload size greatly. So I'd like to show a demo of that now. And I'll switch to a more full-featured version of the app. So that was a very stripped-down version of the app. This one has a couple of more views, and basically it's just more code. So let's have a look at the network tab, what we have. Let's reload. And we see that we are making 118 requests and 2.4 megabytes of transfer size. That's quite a lot. And 118 requests is also sounds kind of a lot. Well, the request can will not be a problem when we get HTTP 2. So HTTP 2 has this concept of a connection that can stream multiple files over a single connection. So this file count is not an issue there. But while we're still waiting for HTTP 2 to be more widely adopted, we need to think about this as well. So the request count can be usually solved with bundling. And let's see how it works. Yeah, I just want to point out that we're getting some JS files, some CSS files, HTML files. And let's see how it looks when it's compiled ahead of time. So I've got some handy scripts ready for that. And a few moments later, we'll have our pre-compiled app. So we put in everything in this AOT folder, and you'll see here that it generated a bunch of these files, including CSS and HTML. So CSS and HTML also gets compiled into JavaScript. So let's see what we've got here now. Okay, so we're loading. Okay, we're now to 10 requests, and 4 of them are this browser sync thing. Let me turn off browser sync. Okay, I'll not do that then. So yeah, we're down to 10 requests and 600 kilobytes. That's not bad. And this is uncompressed JavaScript. So with compression, we can go down even more. And I haven't played around with this much, but the Angular team claims that a simple app can, all bundled up, be just 40 or 50 kilobytes in size, so very small. Yeah, and also, you'll notice here that we've got build.js, but we no longer have any HTML and CSS. Well, we got the global CSS which we're loading, but none of the component styles. So my initial worry about component styles adding additional requests to the load are not an issue actually. So you can use them without much penalty. So that's ahead of time compilation and tree shaking. And the last thing I want to talk about is Angular Universal. And this means pre-rendering on the server. How is it done? So the implementation of Angular 2 is decoupled from the DOM, which means that talking with the DOM, manipulating DOM elements is done through an abstraction layer. And it enables the switching out the actual implementation for browser, server, and mobile. In the browser, it runs on the actual DOM. On the server, it just spits out the pre-rendered HTML. And on mobile, it can bind to native APIs to build the app via APIs that are available on the platform. So why would you do this? Well, actually, let's switch to the demo first. Here I've got actually it's a starter template that I lifted from the internet. And well, it's a fairly simple app with a couple of sections. It makes some requests and got some interactivity. And but how does it look to the browser when you receive it? So I've already opened the view here, and it looks what you would expect from a SPA app. It has this tag, but well, there's nothing there yet. So the app loads, JavaScript starts running, and it renders the app. But this is not good for SEO because Googlebot sees only this. And so it makes your app harder to find for search engines. So here's the code for this. This is a sample from that uses ASP.NET, since I'm most familiar with ASP.NET. But so the pre-rendering is done on the server, and it's done by the backend. And well, your backend must support it. But it has Angular has bindings for ASP.NET, Ruby, and PHP, and I think they're working on more bindings. So this is using the bindings for ASP.NET Core. So here I'm just loading the app the traditional way, but let's comment this out and enable pre-rendering. Let's reload. And now you see you've got the same app. It comes up instantly, and in addition to that, you get this initially rendered view. So users can see the content immediately or faster. And this doesn't just work for the home view. Let's say I go to the counter page and then reload. So this is also pre-rendered on the server. Like I said, this is great for SEO. It improves the perceived performance for the user because the content is displayed immediately. And well, it can kind of work with JavaScript turned off. like a simple navigation works, but obviously not completely. So that's Angular Universal. So that's all the demos I wanted to show to you today, and I would like to talk about the state of Angular 2. It's been a long road to the final release. It's been in development since 2014. We started looking at it since the betas were released late 2015, so we've been working with it almost a year. And the first RC came out in mid-2016. And this was not the RC that I was expecting. Like, there were some quotes like, Angular 2 is ready for production today, from a high-standing Google employee, and component vendors declared that their toolkits have full support for Angular 2. Well, that was not entirely accurate. It had a lot of missing features, it had a lot of breaking changes, and it changed the routers 3 times. So this is kind of a major thing, and it caused us quite a lot of headaches. And I heard later a quote from another Google employee that she was also kind of surprised how they approach RC at Google, because she later told that RC is actually the first chance to get feedback from developers outside of Google. Yeah, so that was an interesting experience. But the good news is that it's been relatively stable since RC5, and the stable release has been out for some time now. And the current version, as of a few days ago, was Angular 2.1. It contained no breaking changes, so all good. And so it's ready to get started today. But I will warn you that you will probably have to do some work to get it to work in certain places. So some parts are still under development, like animations and internationalization support. And the Angular team are continuing development. They promise more performance and more features in animations. So the component ecosystem is also starting to ramp up. Widgemal was the first to release support in the middle of this year, but now Telerik has come out with a control toolkit, and now also Infragistics. And there are also some free alternatives as well. Like here are the set of components from Widgemal and Kendo UI. Not everything is implemented yet, but some things are already there. And here's some screenshots from the Angular Material project that builds UI elements based on material design, and this is free. And another open source thing, PrimeNG. So there are some components for building apps. So the question is how to get started. Well, a prerequisite will be Node.js and NPM. That's for tooling, and most of the tools are run on Node.js. And how can you get started? Well, one is the hard way, everything from scratch. Create an empty directory, create a package JSON, bring in the dependencies, configure compilers, all that stuff. An easier way is starter projects, and if you Google Angular 2 space starter, where space is your favorite backend, then you'll most likely come up with something. And but there's also the easy way, which is the Angular CLI. And I could quickly show this to you now. So let me just start this app. And code is great because it has this terminal built right in. So I'm in my projects folder, and let's build a new great app. So while it's running, I'll switch to that folder and start up a new instance of code. And so we see here that the Angular CLI has pre-generated a basic structure with the configuration. It's set up testing, so testing is easy to get started with. And there's some basic components here. So I could run this app, but I'm afraid it's still restoring packages, so that will take a while. So yeah, so that's Angular CLI, the easy way. And what I would recommend is to try all of these, and you'll take something from the CLI, what it has generated, take something from the starter projects, and learn from documentation. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the presentation. If you want to get started learning Angular, the main place to go is angular.io. It has extremely good documentation, samples, links to related projects like the ones I had mentioned before. Also, you can explore the source, and I have a feeling if you're getting started now, you will have to do it at some point. So the Angular project is on GitHub. Don't be afraid to ask your questions on Stack Overflow. The community is pretty good. I sometimes answer as well. And I guess that brings me to the end of the presentation. I guess if we have time for questions, then we can take questions.
Yeah, we have time for questions, sure. Some questions?
Yes.
I got two questions. The first one is, you mentioned Angular Universal. So do you actually need to write some additional server-side codes, or do you just uncomment one line and it just works?
Well, the idea that it just works. For ASP.NET, there are some libraries that you can use. You bring those in. Well, there's obviously some configuration involved to set up the libraries, but it's not like you would implement this from yourself.
Thanks. And the second one is, you also mentioned component styles, which Angular processes and transforms to something. Does it support some existing style preprocessors like SAS or LESS or something?
Well, not directly, but in your build step, you can have, let's say, a SAS file, and just compile it and point Angular to the CSS, and it should work nicely. You would edit the CSS, the SAS file, and you would, and Angular would pick up the CSS.
Actually, with correction, you can just write in your component file. You can just point, instead of directly to CSS, you can point to SAS file or LESS file, and it will do the correction itself.
Okay.
Just rename the file and.
Well, that's only valid for the Angular CLI. So basically, if you have the tooling behind that set up, so it knows that this is CSS and you need to compile it and it will work. So if you just take plain Angular, then yeah, the web browser don't know what to do.
Now this is complicated.
Yeah.
Actually, no.
Well, there's your answer. Couldn't have answered better.
Any more questions?
I have seen only a few words about the testing in the first
slides. Probably, maybe you can comment on that. What do you use for unit tests in Angular world, and then for integration tests? Do you use them, and how much time it usually takes in your project from CI?
Well, in our project, we're not using the testing tools that Angular recommends. So these features, like the Angular CLI, came out after we had started, and but the prescribed tools are Karma for unit tests and Protractor for end-to-end tests. And I guess that's that they were used also for Angular 1 apps. Yes.
Maybe a strange question. Actually, I'm Java developer, not JavaScript. And when you're talking about the processing of templates, etc., it looks like GSP, very old technology. Why should we move to Angular 2?
Well,
we also have processing and
sure.
why it's better than
No idea in the world is completely new. Everything's been done before some way or another. But, well, I'm not very familiar with Java, but does it run in the browser on the client side?
No, it's just
Yeah.
technology when you have templates and you have
Yeah.
it processes,
Well,
you have
well, one reason to use Angular is that it runs on the browser. So if you would want to put some processing load on the clients and not on the servers, then that's one scenario, I guess. Also, all the reasons we would use Angular for, like mobile and
and another thing about the game, Angular Universe. It's very similar to Amazon Silk. It knows for Kindles, browsers, also all request goes to EC, to cloud, and after that goes to that. Very similar, but this tool is still not propagated well, it's not general, nobody uses it. Why do you think that Angular Universe will be popular? If already the same technology is not popular, maybe silent versions exist already.
well, I can't speak for the technologies that you mentioned. I don't have much experience with them, but I would say Angular is pretty popular already, and even with it being as new as it is, and the reasons, we can go back to the feature slide. There are quite a few things there. So yeah, it's you get to write rich client apps that run on the client, give a great high richness of interactivity on the client. You don't have to post back, redraw the page, and it's fast and it runs everything.
I just thought that this browser by Amazon is just on tools and mobile application,
Okay.
but still not spread wide.
Okay.
Maybe you know why this technology
Well, I can't comment much on that. Sorry.
I have a question. Some good while ago I heard when Angular was announced or something, they will leverage, Angular 2 would leverage the shadow DOM. How is it now? Is it using now it, or what is it?
Well, that's a good question, but the short answer is I don't know. It's a kind of a implementation thing, and I just don't know how it's implemented currently. But as a user, you shouldn't care. But that's, yeah, a good question. I don't know, sorry.
Well, I can comment on that a bit. For components, you have actually in the decorator an option the use of the native shadow DOM by default it like mimics this behavior that you thought generate this random selector for each element. That way it kind of mimics this shadow DOM functionality.
Okay, yeah.
But behind the idea is that to use the native shadow DOM when it will be
When it's available. Currently it's in Chrome, and so you can turn it on, but then it won't work on other browsers. Okay. Another great answer. I have answered it better myself.
Okay, let's do with questions now that you just finish, you come directly to Ronalds, and there is a second person who will answer all of the questions. So please, you come also to Ronalds so you can deal with all the questions. And thank you, Ronalds, for the talk.